Today we're going to show you how we get flawless epoxy resin finish using MAS Epoxies tabletop resin. This tabletop epoxy resin from MAS Epoxies is a professional grade resin product that makes it super easy to get professional grade results. Today we're going to show you our process how we apply MAS Epoxies tabletop epoxy resin finish to tabletops here in our shop and get good professional results. I'm Charles with KnottHead Custom Sawing and Fabworks. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell for notifications and new videos. Let's get started. We're using MAS Epoxies Tabletop Pro Epoxy Resin Finish. It gets mixed in a 1-to-1 ratio and they recommend mixing it by hand. We mix it with a drill and a paddle mixer. The key is to mix it thoroughly and mix it slow so you don't get a bunch of air bubbles. Once we have it mixed thoroughly, we pour it on top of the tabletop and mix it a little bit with the rubber squeegee to ensure that everything is mixed up. Then we start working the resin around the tabletop, filling in all the voids, filling in all the little cracks and nooks and crannies. Then we work the epoxy resin to the edges and let it flow over. After we let it flow over, we use a chip brush, just a cheap wooden handled chip brush, to spread the epoxy resin along the edges to ensure that everything gets coated. Now this is a seal coat. It's not meant to be the finish. It's not meant to be pretty. It's meant to coat everything and seal everything up so that air bubbles are not a problem when you get to your flood coat. Once everything's coated well, we let it sit and cure. Once it's cured, in this case we let it cure overnight, we scuff sand it with 220 grit sandpaper to give it some bite so that the next coat has something to adhere to. Now your sanding doesn't have to be perfect. You're just scuffing it up. You're scuffing it to create a mechanical bond for the next layer. You want to make sure you sand everything thoroughly so the next coat has something to grab onto. Once we have everything sanded, we go over it lightly with a Scotch-Brite scuff pad just to ensure that all the shiny spots are gone. After scuffing with the scuff pad, we blow everything off real well with the air hose, wipe it down with the rag, and get ready for the next coat. Now we're ready for the second seal coat. The second seal coat goes the same way as the first one. We pour the epoxy resin in the center of the tabletop and mix it a little bit with the rubber squeegee. This just helps to ensure there's no sticky spots in the top from something that didn't get mixed all the way. Once it's all mixed, we spread it across the top like we did the first time. We work the epoxy over the top to make sure that anything that didn't get sealed with the first seal coat gets sealed with the second seal coat. Once we've worked it over the top, then we work it towards the edges, and then again we use one of the cheap wooden handled chip brushes to brush the edges and brush anything that might need to be coated so that everything's sealed up. Then we let it cure. Again, just like the first time, once it's cured, we need to sand it. We need to scuff sand it with 220 grit sandpaper to ensure that there's a mechanical bond for the next coat to adhere to. Once we have everything sanded, again, just like the first time, we go over it quickly with a Scotch-Brite scuff pad just to make sure that everything has been scuffed. Now, as you can see here, the seal coats don't have to be pretty. They don't have to be flat. They don't have to be straight. None of the sanding has to be perfect. All you're doing is scuffing it so that the next coat will adhere to the first coat. But everything does have to be sealed. Everything has to be under epoxy. Otherwise, air bubbles can come up through your flood coat. Like I said before, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to get everything sealed up. The brush marks don't matter. The rubber squeegee marks don't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be sealed up and scuffed, ready for the next layer to adhere to. So let's get going. We're going to put a flood coat on this sucker. For the flood coat on this piece, we're going to mix up approximately 4 ounces of material per square foot. We're going to dump it on the center of the tabletop just like we did before, and we're going to mix it a little bit with a 1/8 by 1/8 square notch trowel. The reason we're going to use the square notch trowel is to help gauge the material across the top so that it's the right thickness to just lay out super smooth just like glass. We use the square notch trowel to start spreading the material. We start in the center and move towards the edges. We don't push it over the edges right away. We just move it around, get everything nice and coated, get the material gauged. Then we use the trowel to start pushing it over the edge. Once we have it pushed over the edge, we use this brush. Get it wet with material. Use this brush to work that material around the edges, get everything nice and coated. Then comes the fun part. We're going to tap out this top. We're going to tap out this top to get rid of the lines from the trowel. Let me show you. Now we're going to use this brush that's loaded up with material to tap this top. We're going to use the heel section. We're going to tap the top. We're going to tap the brush into the surface to help break up the lines left behind from the square notch trowel that we used to spread the material. We're not going to try to remove material. We're just going to move the material around a little bit by tapping the brush into the top. We're not doing anything other than breaking up the surface to get those lines that might be left in there from that square notch trowel. Just kind of helps smooth everything out and makes it so this thing's just going to lay out like glass. We're not being forceful here. We're just totally going in a random pattern, just tapping all over the top to break up those lines. We're just getting rid of the lines left over from that trowel. You'll see when we start torching it how this thing will just lay out really nice and super smooth. Once we've made our way around the tabletop, we'll just kind of look and see, double check, make sure that we got everything. Everything's nice and even. Then we'll use this same brush to start going over the edges and get the edges coated really nice too. Once we're done brushing the edges and we made sure that everything's nice and coated, then it's time to get out the torch. We're getting out the torch. We're going to torch the top to break the surface tension of the epoxy resin to allow the bubbles to escape. We're not going to try to burn the resin. We're just trying to wave it over the top. It kind of releases that surface tension on the epoxy and lets those air bubbles escape. Once we've torched this whole surface and gotten rid of the bubbles the first time, we'll let it sit for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll run the torch over it again, see if we can get some more bubbles out of it. But for the most part, it'll look pretty good after this first torching. I'd say that this one's coming along pretty good and looking pretty sweet. Nice and shiny, nice and smooth. Sweet. That's all it takes. We'll go over it again in about 5 minutes and do the bubbles again and see how it looks. As you can see, this one laid out super nice, just like a sheet of glass. Nice, super high gloss finish, flat, smooth, so pretty. Brings out the colors in the wood so nice. And look at that reflection. Man, that is just awesome. Don't be afraid to do this kind of work, guys. It's really not difficult. Provided you follow some pretty simple steps, you can get an amazing finish on a slab table. Like I said, it's really not that difficult, and in just a few minutes here, you've watched me do it and come up with an amazing finish on this table. Please let us know in the comments below if you have any questions about how to use MAS Epoxies Tabletop Pro Resin Finish. If you like this video, do us a favor and give us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and also hit that bell button so you can be notified of new videos that we post. I'd like to take this time to thank you for watching. Peace out and see you on the next one.